The air, 10,000 square feet of it, felt like pure, distilled victory. This penthouse wasn't just a home, it was the ledger of 10 years of sleepless nights and self-denial. To own the sky. To finally have unquestionable control of a space. Then the doorbell rang, and the anxiety of family obligation walked right through the custom-made front door, carrying a designer overnight bag. The 30th floor of the Zenith Towers was quiet, save for the faint, celebratory fizz of the 400 champagne Maya had finally opened. The setting sun was painting the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows in strokes of fiery orange and deep violet, casting long, triumphant shadows across her polished marble floors. Maya Thorne, 32, stood by the retractable glass wall of her terrace, glass in hand, looking out over the sprawl of the city. She had closed the final, enormous check a week ago. The condo was hers. No lien, no bank, no debt. The penthouse was deliberately minimalist, a high-tech sanctuary. It had a private elevator, an open-concept living area that could host a small wedding, and a view that felt like staring down from a cloud. This was her rebuttal to a childhood of being told she was too sensible and lacked flair. Her flair was the financial statement. Her art was the architecture of her life. The private elevator chime announced the arrival of guests. Maya's moment of perfect solitude was over. There she is. Richard Thorne, her father, boomed, stepping directly from the elevator into the foyer. He was dressed in a pristine linen suit, his voice already filling the space. My girl, the queen of the citadel. Laura, did you see the size of this living area? It's palatial. Laura Thorne, Maya's mother, walked in behind him. An expertly curated picture of elegant disapproval. She kissed Maya's cheek, a peck that smelled faintly of expensive perfume and implied judgment, and then immediately began moving cushions on the immaculate white sofa. It's very clean, dear. Laura murmured, a phrase that meant it lacks warmth and charm, but I will tolerate it. Maya forced a bright smile. It's minimalist, Mom. And thank you. Would you like some champagne, Dad? Later. We have a favor to ask, Richard said. The jovial tone instantly dissolving into an expectant gravity. He didn't ask if she could do a favor, he announced that she owed one. Then, Chloe stepped out of the elevator. Chloe was 25, beautiful and utterly adrift. She was a self-proclaimed conceptual artist, currently dressed in a layered outfit that looked expensive and slightly dirty. She was holding a large, paint-splattered canvas and an oversized backpack. Maya, Chloe said, her voice small, her eyes huge and wounded. She looked around the penthouse, not with admiration, but with the wary relief of someone finding a soft place to fall. Chloe. What's Maya asked, the glass of champagne suddenly feeling heavy and cold. Laura stepped in, immediately softening her voice into the one she reserved for delicate matters, which always, somehow, involved Chloe. Well, darling, there's been a situation. Chloe's little studio apartment, it wasn't suitable for her new collection. The landlord was being entirely unreasonable about the solvent fumes, and they terminated the lease. Terminated, Maya repeated, as in, she was evicted. Richard cleared his throat. A technicality. The point is her creative energy is stifled. She needs space. She needs light. She needs an environment that understands her gifts. He waved his hand dramatically at the panoramic view. And she needs it immediately. We told her she can stay here for a few months. Maya stared at them. This was not a request. This was an announcement of occupation. The family unit operated like a government. Maya was the efficient revenue stream, and Chloe was the protected national asset. A few months? Maya's voice was tight. I just finished paying this place off. I work from home. I need quiet. Nonsense, darling, Laura said, finally placing the cushions exactly how she wanted them. You're a software engineer, you just stare at a screen. Chloe is creating. Besides, it's only 3 months max, until we find her a new, suitable gallery-adjacent studio space. Think of it as giving her a leg up. You're so successful, Maya. You can afford the inconvenience. The phrase, you can afford the inconvenience, was the blade they always used. Maya had achieved success through discipline. Chloe's lack of success was always treated as a fragile condition that required resources. Maya's resources, to cure. To refuse would be to prove her mother's subtle suggestion right, that she was the cold, transactional sister, incapable of real familial love. Chloe walked over and put her hand gently on Maya's arm. Her touch was fragile, appealing. It would just be the guest room, Maya. I promise I'll be invisible. It's just, I really need to finish this sky. Bound Isolation series, and this view is everything. I can't let mom and dad down. The last line was the clincher. Chloe had weaponized their parents' anxiety. Maya felt the familiar, debilitating tug of guilt. She was the secure one. She was the one who could give. For 3 months, she told herself she could endure it. It was a small price for the silence of her parents' disapproval. Fine. Maya sighed, setting the champagne glass down with a slight clink. 3 months. The guest suite is yours, Chloe, but you keep the paint in there, and you respect my schedule. Richard beamed a hearty, approving slap on her shoulder. That's my girl, always the responsible one. We knew we could count on you. As Richard and Laura prepared to leave, they shared a knowing look over Maya's head. Look of satisfied, conspiratorial relief. Maya caught it in the reflection of the giant window, the subtle, shared understanding that the pressure had worked, that the transaction had been completed. The look didn't say, "Thank you." It said, "We got what we came for." Standing alone again, the beautiful city lights spread out before her like diamonds. Maya looked at her penthouse, no longer seeing a testament to her independence, but an empty cage she had just willingly unlocked for her own family. Her emotional realization was immediate and chilling. She had bought her freedom, but she had failed to establish her boundaries. The penthouse was paid for, but the cost of her family peace had just started climbing. The first 4 weeks were defined by a single, crushing weight, the silence Maya imposed on herself to maintain her sanity. She walked on eggshells in the home she had purchased with granite and sweat. The 3-month countdown became an internal ticking clock, marking the days until her life could return to the precise, predictable algorithm she had built for herself. But the apartment wasn't just occupied, it was being re-sculpted. Maya's routines, once the bedrock of her productivity, began to crumble. Her 600 a.m. meditation ritual was now punctuated by the sound of Chloe dragging furniture across the floor of the guest suite, rearranging the space for better creative flow. Her evening video calls with her West Coast team often had to be moved to a low-volume whisper because Chloe was vibing to intense classical music in the living room, supposedly preparing her subconscious for painting. The space itself was undergoing a slow, aesthetic colonization, Maya's own meticulously chosen, minimalist art. Abstract pieces in neutral tones was taken down and stacked neatly in the corner of a utility closet. In their place, Chloe installed her own work massive, intensely colored canvases that pulsed with erratic, aggressive energy. One morning, Maya found a note taped to the industrial stainless steel fridge. I needed the light in the master bedroom today. It has the perfect north-facing exposure. I'll be out by 5. Don't disturb the muse. Love C. The master suite. The one room Maya had designated as entirely, untouchably her own. She stood in the foyer, fists clenched, staring at the note. Her internal programmer's logic screamed an agreement was made. A contract was signed, in principle at least. But the sisterly bond, laced with years of parental conditioning, paralyzed her. Chloe's needs were always presented as emergencies, while Maya's were simply inconveniences. She walked past the master suite. The door was ajar. Inside, Chloe was perched on a stool, palette in hand, humming tunelessly. Maya's custom-made silk bedding was draped haphazardly over a chair, protecting it from a dozen tiny splatters of cadmium red. "Chloe," Maya began, her voice low and dangerously even. "We agreed to the guest room." Chloe didn't look up. "Oh, right. Listen, I know. But the shadows in there are all wrong. The light here, it's transcendent. I'm doing this massive triptych, it needs the width of this space. It's for my portfolio, Maya. It's for my future." She gestured with a brush, adding a sharp, angular line. "It's temporary, 5 hours max." Maya felt the air drain out of her. The penthouse, the symbol of her personal victory, now felt like a shared workspace where she was the least important employee. She retreated, choosing the cramped quiet of the utility closet to take her conference call. The faint smell of paint solvent already permeating the pristine air conditioning, the casual entitlement escalated. Chloe began hosting impromptu, art-gazing sessions with her circle of avant-garde friends, turning the penthouse into a rotating exhibition space. Maya would return from the gym to find 5 strangers sitting cross-legged in her living room, discussing the socio-political commentary of a drip painting Chloe had done on the terrace, drinking Maya's expensive French press coffee and using her imported cashmere throws as floor mats. "They're potential patrons, Maya," Chloe would whisper fiercely. "This is networking. You wouldn't understand, your work is so contained. Maya's frustration curdled into a cold resentment. Her parents, who had promised to help Chloe find a new place, were conspicuously silent. When Maya called Laura, her mother was dismissive. "Oh, darling, we're vetting a few places, but they're just not quite right. You know how sensitive Chloe is to atmosphere. Be patient. She's finally productive. Don't disrupt the momentum." "Honestly, Maya, you are so uptight about space. It's a huge apartment." The underlying message. Maya's discomfort was trivial. Chloe's heart was vital. The deadline passed without a whisper. No apology, no acknowledgement, and certainly no moving truck. Maya stood in the kitchen that morning, making coffee, watching Chloe on the terrace, stretching dramatically in the morning sun. Chloe wasn't packing, she was setting up a miniature Zen garden on the edge of the railing. "Chloe," Maya said, her voice flat. "It's the 18th. 3 months ago today you moved in." Chloe turned, offering a sweet, almost pitying smile. "Oh, that old deadline. Yes, well, my dear, art doesn't follow a calendar, does it?" She walked in, brushing past Maya to get a bottle of purified water from the fridge. "Mum and Dad said the search is taking longer than expected. They told me not to worry my little head about it." That phrase, "Mum and Dad said," was a shield deflecting all responsibility. The parents, the architects of the slow-motion invasion, had officially gone silent on the exit strategy. Maya felt a jolt of something sharper than anger, deep, cold suspicion. This wasn't about a sensitive artist or a tough rental market. This was a long game, orchestrated from above. That evening, alone in the master bedroom, Maya was searching for a specific flash drive she'd misplaced behind her office desk in the guest suite, which Chloe was now using full-time. She didn't want to alert Chloe, so she waited until she was sure her sister was deep in a bubble bath. The sound of a podcast audible through the closed door. She slipped into the guest suite. It was a disaster area. Canvases were leaning against the walls, drying, the room smelled intensely of turpentine and mildew, and there were trails of paint on the pale carpet. As she felt around for the drive, her fingers brushed against something stiff, tucked between the pages of an oversized art textbook on Chloe's nightstand. It wasn't a sketchbook or a receipt. It was a formal, heavy manila envelope, sealed with the logo of their parents' high-powered corporate law firm. Every alarm bell in Maya's analytical mind screamed at once. Do not open it. Do not violate her privacy. Wait and ask later. But her hands moved before her conscience could catch up. The need to understand the source of the rot was overwhelming. She tore the clasp open. Inside were multiple sheets of heavy stock paper. Not apartment contracts, not even a gallery proposal. The first document was labeled DDOF Tiasira Aid Relenduro E Ranqi. Maya's breath hitched, turning the page. The document was meticulously prepared, listing the full legal description of her penthouse. The details blurred, but the keywords slammed into her. Grantor Maya Thorne hereby transfers, assigns, and irrevocably conveys quitclaims and grants the subject property to grantee Chloe Thorne. The date at the top was not recent. It was dated 2 days before Chloe moved in. A secondary document, clearly intended as a backup, was a detailed legal contract from the bank acknowledging the final payoff of the mortgage. Maya scanned the fine print, remembering how her father had insisted on handling the last bit of paperwork for her, calling it a parental closing gift. But her father hadn't just paid off the final $50,000 balance she still owed, he had paid it off contingent upon a separate agreement. That agreement, attached as an exhibit, stipulated that in exchange for the gift of financial aid, Maya would commit to future familial support. And crucially, a right of first refusal for the family to designate a temporary resident indefinitely. The whole structure was a beautifully constructed legal trap. Her parents hadn't paid off the mortgage out of pride, they had bought leverage. They had created a scenario where, when Maya inevitably tried to kick Chloe out, they could produce this evidence. Or worse, the transfer papers, as proof that her resistance was a breach of her agreement, perhaps even a breach of a pre-existing promise to gift the property. Maya sank onto the corner of the paint-spattered bed, the legal documents trembling in her hands. The cool, detached logic of the paperwork was a far greater blow than any verbal argument. This wasn't a messy familial disagreement. This was a calculated, long-term operation carried out by the people she trusted most. The realization was a punch to the gut. Her parents had used her achievement against her. They saw her independence not as a reason to celebrate her, but as a resource to be redirected to the fragile sister. She carefully put the documents back and sealed the envelope. The sound of running water in the bathroom stopped. She slipped out of the room just as Chloe opened the door, wrapped in one of Maya's fluffy white robes, hair in a towel. "Oh, hi," Chloe said, smiling warmly. "Did you just get home? I'm making soup. We should talk about my Sky-bound series tonight. I think I've finally nailed the tone." Maya looked at her sister's innocent, expectant face, the face that held the deed to her life. The cold anger, which had been building for 3 months, finally shattered into a painful, terrifying understanding. "I know what you're doing, Chloe," Maya thought, her mouth too dry to speak the words. The turning point was internal and final. The sister she knew was gone, and her life was on the line. She could no longer trust the blood ties, she had to fight the family for her own home. The confrontation was now inevitable. The air was thick with the cloying scent of Chloe's celebratory broth simmering on the stove. A domesticity that felt like mockery. Maya didn't wait for a better moment. The discovery of the transfer documents mandated immediate action. She walked directly from her makeshift workspace in the kitchen, the manila envelope heavy in her hand. Maya found her parents, Richard and Laura, already seated at the sleek glass dining table, which Chloe had appropriated for a layout session involving tubes of acrylic and several rolls of tracing paper. They were casually reviewing a prospectus for a gallery opening Chloe was planning. A gallery opening Maya hadn't even known she was invited to. "We need to talk about the apartment," Maya stated, dropping the envelope onto the glass surface with a sharp thwack. The sound made Richard jump, spilling a few drops of water onto the prospectus. Laura's eyes flicked from the envelope to Maya, her composure instantly hardening. "Maya, honestly, you look terrible. You need to relax. Chloe just needs a little more time, we told you." "I'm not talking about Chloe's timeline, Mother. I'm talking about this." Maya tapped the envelope. "I found the deed of transfer. And the mortgage contingency clause. You two didn't just help her find a place, you set a trap for me." Richard immediately switched tactics, shifting from patronizing father to defensive executive. "Watch your tone, Maya. That paperwork is complex. We were trying to secure Chloe's future. You are financially secure, you can always buy another unit. Chloe has potential. Potential. You leveraged my hard work, my property, against my ability to say no to you." Maya felt the years of biting her tongue fueling her voice. "I paid off the mortgage because I earned it. You circumvented that by adding hidden legal strings. This isn't support, it's coercion." A Chloe entered from the main suite, drawn by the raised voices. She looked genuinely confused, which Maya suspected was a practiced act. "What's going on? Is someone yelling? My focus is so delicate right now." Laura stood up, positioning herself between Maya and Chloe, an unwavering, protective barrier. This was the moment Maya had dreaded, the moment the allegiance became absolute. "It stops here, Maya," Laura said, her voice dropping to an icy register Maya had never heard directed at her. "You have always been the strong one, the reliable one. You don't need this space as much as Chloe needs the stability to launch her career. We covered the final payment, we own the leverage. If you cannot be the compassionate older sister we raised you to be, then you will reap the consequences of your selfishness." Richard stepped forward, his expression grim. He slid a new document across the table toward Maya. It was a pre-signed, but yet to be dated, release of claims and assumption of debt document for Maya's future investment properties. A contract Maya had signed years ago as a placeholder agreement when she first started working with their firm's financial advisor. "You have two choices, Maya. Choice 1. You sign this transfer document immediately, and we forget this unpleasantness. Chloe stays, you sign this release, and we continue supporting your professional portfolio. Choice 2. You refuse. We release the deed transfer to Chloe now, and we release the clause to the bank. You will be personally liable for the remaining 50,000 mortgage balance, plus the penalty fees for premature default on that portfolio agreement. You will lose the Penthouse, and you will be professionally blacklisted by every investor we know. You are strong enough to start over, Maya. Chloe isn't." The emotional shift was immediate and absolute. Maya looked from the document, representing her financial ruin, to her parents, embodying years of conditional love, and finally to Chloe, who watched the proceedings with wide, expectant eyes. The familiar need to please the parents vaporized, replaced by a shocking, purifying surge of indignation. They hadn't asked for a favor. They had demanded surrender. Maya picked up the deed of transfer slowly, deliberately tearing it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter onto the expensive rug. "No," Maya said, her voice low and unwavering, completely devoid of the panic they expected. "I will not sign anything. This isn't about money anymore. This is about theft, and it's about the fact that you never saw me as anything more than a reliable ATM." She looked directly at her father. "I'll fight you on the DAR 50,000 in court. I'll fight you on the portfolio contract. I will burn my reputation to the ground before I let you destroy my life's work, because you decided my sister needed a better view." She didn't wait for their next salvo. She turned, walked straight to the guest suite, grabbed her work laptop and the emergency go bag she always kept packed, a habit born of 30 years of anticipating family emergencies, and headed for the elevator. The confrontation was over. The betrayal was fully exposed, and Maya had chosen war over capitulation. The emotional high of defiance was intoxicating, but it was immediately followed by the cold dread of the coming battle. The elevator doors closed on Maya's act of defiance, sealing her fate outside the gilded cage. The fallout was immediate and total, a calculated, two-pronged assault involving legal pressure and social ostracization. Maya moved into a sparse, short-term rental apartment downtown, trading panoramic views for the harsh reality of isolation and strategy. Maya's first move was to contact her own lawyer, a sharp but skeptical corporate litigator named Marcus Chen. Marcus, reviewing the documents Maya provided, confirmed her worst fears. "Your parents didn't just play hardball, Maya," Marcus stated during their initial meeting, gesturing at the mortgage contingency clause. "They created a hostile takeover mechanism. The DAR 50,000 they gifted you was immediately converted into equity that hinges on your compliance with their other demands. They were counting on you never reading the fine print." The fallout began within 24 hours. Richard Thorne, using his influence, put a freeze, or at least a severe hold, on several ancillary investment accounts Maya used for her larger tech ventures, citing the need to protect family assets, pending the resolution of the Penthouse dispute. Simultaneously, Chloe, now officially the victim of her older sister's greed, filed a temporary injunction against Maya's access to the property, citing emotional distress from the confrontation. The Penthouse was locked down, technically in legal limbo, but practically occupied by Chloe. Maya felt the isolation acutely. Her bank accounts were suddenly sluggish, and the threat of being professionally blacklisted by her parents' network felt very real. She was fighting not just for the square footage, but for the right to determine her own financial future without their veto power. The most painful consequence was the silence from the Thorne fortress. Her parents stopped returning calls. Not just angry calls, but the mundane check-ins about holidays or birthdays. Gunned. Laura and Richard executed a masterful PR campaign among their social circle. Maya was no longer the successful, driven daughter, she was recast as the unstable, grasping sibling. Whispers circulated that Maya had become emotionally unhinged after refusing to share her success with her delicate, gifted sister, who was allegedly suffering in the chaos Maya created. When Maya ran into her aunt at a grocery store days later, the woman visibly recoiled. "It's a terrible thing, Maya. Just terrible. Chloe's doing so well, and you just can't stand to see someone else shine, can you?" This public narrative stung more than the financial threat. It confirmed Maya's deepest realization. Her parents' love was conditional on her utility to them and to Chloe. The moment she demanded autonomy, she became the villain in their carefully constructed family drama. For the first week, Maya was paralyzed by the sheer scope of the betrayal. She felt the phantom weight of the city lights above her. Ghost limb where her achievement used to be. She mourned the loss of her home, but more profoundly, the loss of her family structure. Then, Marcus presented a sliver of hope. "The transfer documents are powerful, but they are also dated. If we can prove that your parents engaged in undue influence and coercion based on the documented history of your obligations to them, we can challenge the validity of the transfer and the enforceability of the mortgage contingency." This was Maya's focus. She stopped reacting to their moves and started analyzing the evidence. She spent days gathering every email, every text, every canceled holiday, documentation of every time her parents had leveraged guilt, responsibility, or financial reward to control her decisions. She was applying her greatest strength, analytical rigor, to the mess of her emotional life. The despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The realization cementing this act was, they thought they had taken her home, but they had only given her the data she needed to build an iron-clad defense and a new life. The legal battle was long, draining, and emotionally sterile. It culminated not in a dramatic courtroom scene, but in a tense, all-day mediation session. Maya arrived prepared not as the dutiful daughter, but as the relentless analyst. The final meeting was held in a neutral downtown conference room. Richard and Laura sat opposite Maya, flanked by their corporate lawyers. Chloe was absent, citing the stress of the proceedings. Maya's lawyer, Marcus, laid out the evidence at a timeline detailing every instance of financial reward tied to obedience, the specific, veiled language used in the mortgage contingency clause, and Maya's documented history of being denied autonomy in familial decisions. The case wasn't just about the deed, it was about pattern of control and undue influence. When Richard's lawyer attempted to use the emotional leverage, claiming Maya was destroying her sister's future and breaking the family apart, Marcus simply presented the text messages showing Chloe actively planning renovations of the penthouse before the 3-month mark was even up. The weight of the evidence, and the legal risk of having their corporate dealings exposed in open court, broke the Thorne's resolve. The resolution was reached late that evening. Maya retained the deed to the penthouse free and clear. The transfer documents were deemed void. The parents would pay all outstanding legal fees incurred by Maya. The threats to her investment portfolio were dropped, and the contracts were legally nullified. Chloe was required to vacate the premises within 48 hours. Maya didn't feel elation, she felt a cold, deep vindication. She had successfully defended her life's work against the architects of her childhood guilt. The next day, Maya returned to the penthouse accompanied by a security guard and a locksmith. Chloe was gone, but the apartment was left in a state of chaos. Splatters of dried paint, passive-aggressive notes taped to the mirror, and the lingering, sharp smell of turpentine. The mess was her sister's final, resentful mark. Maya didn't stay to clean. The penthouse was irrevocably tainted. It was no longer her sanctuary, it was a monument to betrayal. She placed the penthouse on the market that afternoon. The sale was swift and closed at a significant profit, confirming the property's true worth. With the proceeds, Maya did not buy another glittering tower unit. Instead, she purchased a beautiful, smaller home with a large private garden and a dedicated, soundproof office space, a true sanctuary. In a city 3 states away, it was a place chosen for its peace and quiet, a location far from the gravitational pull of her parents' influence. Before moving, Maya wrote a final, short message. Not a letter of rage or sadness, but a final statement of autonomy. She texted it to her parents and Chloe simultaneously. The legal matter is concluded. I have retained ownership of the property and am selling it. I am moving out of the city and establishing new roots. I wish you all well. Please do not attempt to contact me. My peace is non-negotiable. She hit send, then immediately blocked all 3 numbers. Standing in her new, sunlit garden weeks later, Maya finally felt the closure that legal victory couldn't provide. She realized that the greatest achievement wasn't owning a penthouse, it was owning her own choices. She had lost a family that had never truly seen her, but she had gained self-respect and an unbreakable boundary. She had learned that the foundation of a successful life is not built on fulfilling others' expectations, but on protecting your own peace. She was finally, truly free. The story ends with Maya stepping into her new office, closing the door on the past, and opening her laptop to build the next phase of her career, this time entirely on her own terms.